In a world ruled not by swords but by emotions, the strongest are not those who strike hardest, but those who leave others questioning their every breath. I am the narrator of human manipulation, the keeper of hidden truths, and tonight we unfold one of Machiavelli's most ruthless laws, the art of never giving closure. Humans are not controlled by chains, laws, or blades. They are controlled by the emotions they cannot resolve. The greatest prison ever built did not require walls, guards, or iron. It was crafted with unanswered feelings and unresolved endings. When a person walks away without clarity, without explanation, without final truth, they do not disappear from the other person's mind. Instead, they take residence inside it. The mind hates incompleteness. It is wired to chase what it cannot fully understand, and the darker the mystery, the stronger the emotional addiction becomes. What is unfinished becomes unforgettable, because the mind continues to search for a missing conclusion long after the story has ended. A person who receives full emotional closure walks away with peace, balance, and psychological release. They may hurt, but eventually they heal. However, a person denied closure carries questions into the future, repeating memories like riddles, trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. They turn every moment over and over, wondering what they could have changed, what they misunderstood, what invisible message they missed. In that endless loop, power shifts. Their thoughts no longer belong to themselves, they belong to the ghost of the unanswered moment. The one who holds the unanswered truth silently occupies the throne inside their mind. Unfinished emotion becomes a silent currency, the most valuable psychological leverage. People chase what they cannot interpret. They analyze silence harder than words. They assign meaning to gestures that were never defined. They search for purpose in actions that were never explained. When clarity is denied, imagination replaces logic. And imagination is far more powerful, more dramatic, and more emotionally consuming than reality. Doubt, confusion, and unanswered questions become invisible chains, binding memory to emotion and emotion to obsession. The person left without closure does not move on at the natural pace of time. Every unanswered question remains an emotional anchor. It ties them to the moment, to the person, and to the story they were never allowed to finish. They rehearse conversations that never happened, invent explanations that were never spoken, and replay scenarios that cannot be changed. Their emotional energy no longer moves forward. It circulates, recycling itself until it becomes part of their identity. Their heartbeat becomes married to a mystery. The human psyche will always try to solve what hurt it the most. It will revisit trauma before it revisits triumph. Closure is not simply an ending. It is release, it is escape. It is the destroyer of emotional dependency. Remove closure and the door to psychological freedom remains locked. People define their lives by the chapters they cannot close. They measure their worth by the explanations they never received. They chase validation long after the relationship, argument, betrayal, or interaction has ended, hoping one revelation will make everything make sense. Unfinished emotion is never forgotten. It does not fade, it evolves. It becomes curiosity, then frustration, then imagination, then obsession, then identity. The story lives forever because it was never allowed to die. Certainty is emotional closure's twin, and together they grant freedom. Once a person fully understands what happened, why it happened, and what it truly meant, they no longer need to revisit the past. They no longer need to search, question, analyze, or mentally replay. Certainty allows a person to bury the memory instead of carrying it like a torch. and a buried memory loses its ability to command attention. But doubt is entirely different. Doubt is the invisible tether that keeps the human mind circling an experience long after it is over. When a person does not fully understand the situation, they cannot abandon it. They are forced into psychological orbit, returning again and again, trying to extract meaning from fragments that were never designed to be solved. The most effective form of control is not domination, but curiosity. When someone is left wondering, their mind becomes your echo chamber. They will create possibilities you never spoke, search for meanings you never intended, and imagine answers that may be far more powerful than anything you could have said. In uncertainty, the victim becomes the author, but the story still revolves around you. Doubt forces them to interpret instead of accept, and interpretation is a never-ending cycle. The moment they believe they found the answer, doubt whispers again, "But what if you're wrong?" And instantly the cycle resets. Certainty kills emotional pursuit, because certainty satisfies the brain's demand for what psychologists call cognitive closure. When closure is granted, the mind can categorize the experience, file it away, and redirect emotional energy into the future. But when clarity is withheld, the mind cannot store the memory properly. It becomes an unsolved riddle, and humans are naturally driven to complete, decode, and conquer what they do not understand. This psychological drive transforms emotional confusion into long-term fixation. When someone is kept in doubt, they become their own interrogator. They question themselves more than they question you. They wonder if they misunderstood your feelings, misread your actions, overestimated their value, or failed to comprehend your intentions. Doubt creates self-blame, and self-blame is emotional quicksand. They begin to internalize the confusion, assuming there must be something wrong with them that prevented the truth from ever being revealed. The more they question themselves, the more deeply they sink into this emotional maze, and the more influence you retain over their thoughts, decisions, and emotional patterns. Uncertainty also creates hope, and hope is one of the most addictive emotional chemicals in human behavior. When someone is uncertain, they cling to the possibility that meaning still exists, that something can still be explained, repaired, or revived. Hope cannot exist where truth is fully known. Hope thrives only where possibilities are left undefined, unspoken, and unexplained. Hope is the sweetest poison because the victim drinks it willingly. Doubt also keeps emotional energy alive because it prevents the mind from rewriting the past into a logical conclusion. Without a conclusion, they cannot detach. They replay conversations, search for hidden signals, and analyze moments that were originally insignificant. Their emotional world becomes suspended, unable to move forward because it does not know how to label what happened. Humans fear the unknown far more than the painful known, which is why they often return to confusion instead of accepting certainty. That hurts. Doubt is not the absence of truth. It is the strategic delay of it, and as long as the question remains unanswered, influence remains alive. Words are often believed to be the strongest weapon, but in the psychology of power, words are merely tools of clarity, and clarity brings emotional release. When you speak, you provide answers, and answers give people closure. But silence is not the absence of communication. It is the most haunting form of it. Silence does not end a conversation, it echoes it. It forces the other person to continue speaking internally, creating theories, assumptions, and emotional narratives far stronger than anything you could have expressed aloud. Silence allows the mind of another person to become your battlefield, and the wars they fight are against their own thoughts, not your actions. When a person seeks closure, they are not truly seeking truth. They are seeking emotional relief. They want the pain to be explained, justified, or softened. They want a reason that makes the suffering feel meaningful. If you speak, they may hurt, but eventually they will accept. If you remain silent, they keep chasing meaning forever. Silence disrupts their emotional equilibrium. It denies the brain the comfort of knowing, and the unknown becomes the source of continuous reflection. The mind is addicted to completion, and silence deprives it of that completion, forcing it into psychological hunger. Silence transforms the other person into a detective of their own suffering, and every time they revisit the memory, your influence reactivates. They will try to decipher your motives, your emotions, your intentions, and even imagined hidden messages. They begin replaying scenes and conversations with new interpretations each time, because silence gives them no final answer to anchor the truth. Their reality becomes fluid, their memory becomes unreliable, their emotional stability becomes negotiable. You no longer have to speak, because their own thoughts will speak for you, often far more brutally and dramatically than any reality you could have confessed. Words can be refuted, debated, and rejected. Silence cannot be disproven, because silence leaves infinite interpretations. Silence is psychological fog, thick, confusing, disorienting, and impossible to escape without guidance that never arrives. When you say nothing, the other person is forced to project their own fears, hopes, insecurities, and unfinished wounds onto your silence. In this emotional darkness, they are no longer analyzing you. They are analyzing themselves. This creates a mirror effect, where the confusion becomes personal, internal, and deeply emotional. Silence also holds power because it removes predictability. People fear what they cannot predict. When you speak, they can categorize you. When you are silent, they cannot define you, control you, or anticipate your next move. You become an unsolved emotional equation. And the more they fail to solve it, the more valuable the answer seems. Silence increases your perceived importance because anything scarce becomes valuable, and any unavailable truth becomes legendary inside the mind of the one who seeks it. The silent individual becomes a symbol, not just a memory. They become the unfinished sentence that the mind repeats unconsciously. Silence does not close the door. It leaves it slightly open, creating the illusion that something could still enter or exit. And illusions are stronger than facts because illusions adapt, evolve, and survive longer than reality ever can. Silence makes them feel the weight of what was lost, the confusion of what was unclear, and the hunger for what was never spoken. Through silence, you turn absence into presence, and distance into dominance. When a person begins seeking answers, comfort, or emotional validation from someone else, they unknowingly hand over psychological authority. The moment they need you to define how they should feel, think, or interpret an experience, they place you in the role of emotional judge. This creates an invisible hierarchy. The one who seeks validation stands below the one who can grant it. And in this hierarchy, power is not taken by force. It is given voluntarily, through emotional dependence disguised as honest vulnerability. The need for validation becomes the leash, and the silence or ambiguity of the other becomes the handler. Human beings are not addicted to love, loyalty, or even praise. They are addicted to confirmation. If an experience is not validated, it feels unfinished. If a memory is not confirmed, it feels distorted. If a feeling is not acknowledged, it feels uncertain. When validation is absent, the individual becomes emotionally restless. They question the worth of their own perception. They replay events not because they miss you, but because they do not trust their own mind anymore. And when a person stops trusting themselves, they trust the source of validation even more, hoping one day a clear answer will finally repair their internal conflict. Validation is emotional currency. People spend time, thought, loyalty, and even dignity trying to earn it. Some chase it through dialogue, some through apologies, some through trying harder, and some through waiting indefinitely. The more they chase it, the more valuable it becomes. The more scarce it is, the more powerful its holder becomes. Scarcity increases demand, and psychological scarcity increases emotional dependence. A single sentence from you becomes more powerful than 1,000 thoughts from them, because it is no longer just communication. It becomes salvation. The human mind is terrified of being wrong about emotional experiences. It fears loving someone who never loved them, trusting someone who deceived them, or investing in something that was never real. Without validation, the person cannot label the experience correctly. They feel suspended in emotional uncertainty, unable to decide whether they were meaningful or foolish, valued or disposable, chosen or used. This uncertainty transforms validation into the final verdict of self-worth, and whoever holds the power to validate holds the power to define their emotional identity. The mind naturally returns to the last person who held emotional significance, but it becomes enslaved to the one who denies emotional confirmation. Validation becomes not only what they want, but what they feel they must obtain to restore inner balance. This dependency does not weaken over time. It intensifies because the longer the validation is missing, the greater its imagined impact becomes. They believe that one sentence, one explanation, one final answer could heal years of confusion, not realizing that the absence of validation has already shaped who they are becoming. People who seek validation become emotionally programmable. They adjust their behavior, tone, personality, and even values in hope that it will unlock approval. They attempt to reverse, engineer what went wrong, not realizing the other person may never intend to confirm anything. And in that silent struggle, the pursuer loses more than answers. They lose emotional sovereignty. When a person needs your words to feel complete, they become psychologically indebted, and the one capable of granting validation becomes the unseen ruler of their emotional universe in the theater of human emotion. Power rarely belongs to the loud, the aggressive, or the physically dominant. True psychological leverage lies in what remains unfinished, unanswered, and unresolved. The mind is not controlled by force. It is controlled by curiosity, by doubt, by emotional hunger, and by the silent echo of what was never explained. Those who seek closure become seekers. Those who demand answers become dependents. But the one who stands unmoved, unbothered, and unreadable becomes the architect of emotional gravity. Yet understand this: these laws are not written to glorify cruelty, but to reveal the hidden mechanics that govern human attachment and psychological vulnerability. Many suffer because they do not know how invisible power is created, traded, or sustained. When you learn these truths, you no longer become a prisoner of silence, confusion, or unfinished stories. You recognize when someone is withholding closure, not because they are superior, but because uncertainty is their only tool. And the moment you recognize the game, the spell dissolves. Power is not merely the ability to control others. True power is the ability to control your own mind so deeply that no one can use silence, doubt, distance, or unfinished emotion against you ever again.